Innovation Unplugged from the Alabama Community College System's Innovation Center takes you inside Alabama's workforce development. Join us for enlightening conversations with community leaders and industry experts showcasing experiences, addressing key issues, and celebrating successes in the workforce initiatives across the state.
Welcome back to another episode of Innovation Unplugged, a podcast courtesy of the Innovation Center and ACCS. I'm Sharon Alley. I'm a senior project coordinator for course development. And Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Tom Chappell. I'm career readiness coordinator. Matt Heaton and I, as career readiness manager, work primarily with K-12 liaison between the high schools and the community colleges across the state, rolling out all things skills for success.
Right. So I'm on the curriculum team, and Tom's on our workforce team, and so we work hand in hand in our course development process. So we'll be talking about that today. And with us, we also have Russell Wood, and we are in this podcast doing something a little bit different. This is my first podcast and Tom's first podcast here. So we're excited to be here, and we're excited to talk about one of our new upcoming courses. So one of our courses that will be coming to you. And so Russell, if you would introduce yourself and just talk about this new course. This new course is called Nursery Landscape Worker.
Sure. So I'm Russell Wood. I'm Executive Director for the Alabama Nursery Landscape Association. And I got in contact with the Innovation Center a couple of years ago through Zach Lee and Mara Harrison and Keith Phillips and some others, and ultimately, let them know about the need for a course for our industry. And we had started hosting equipment rodeos to get high school FFA students interested in working with equipment and kind of introduce them to our industry. And so Kayla had sent some of y'all's representatives out to various rodeos, and they saw what we were doing and felt like we were doing good work and wanted to be a partner and get this course together.
So this course, when you had conversations with Kayla and I saw your industry request for training, one thing it is important to note is that our courses are developed with industry in mind. Our industry requests the training. It's not coming from the Innovation Center. We don't come up with the idea. It's coming from industry, and the industry says we have a need, and we need a course developed for this reason. So can you talk about that need that's there for this course and why it would be beneficial to both industry and people who might be interested in that field?
Sure. So our industry has struggled with labor problems for decades. Recently other industries have started to struggle as well with employment, but ours has gone on a long time, and mainly because the work's somewhat seasonal, and for a while the pay wasn't that great. But industry has realized that the pay needs to get there, so they've been raising the bar on that. But it's just, a very physical type of work. If people can go make money in a restaurant or somewhere that's easier to do, they kind of tend to want to do that, the path of least resistance. So we target people that are more interested in an office without walls. The people that enjoy hunting and fishing, like to be outdoors, seem to be successful in our industry. So we try to figure out how can we get in front of them and let them know about opportunities in our industry. Not everybody's going to be a doctor, a dentist, or a lawyer. And we want to make sure that they understand the standard for our industry, of what professionalism is. Sometimes they can get maybe not a good opinion for a high schooler, for example, with what their parents may think about our industry. And we want to show them what true professionals look like. And we often say that we're kind of like the landscape fairies. If you go to a business or an office park or shopping mall or something like that, a lot of times you don't see the landscape companies that do those big projects. And that's because they come out first thing in the morning before anybody gets up and before the place opens and get all the work done for safety reasons, to get out and do that. But getting back to, why do we need it? It's just for years we've had a problem, and we want to really open people's eyes to the opportunities that exist. For a young person, the barrier to entry is low. It's a physical job, and there's things you need to do knowledge-wise and skill-wise. A lot of people think it's unskilled labor, and it's not unskilled. A lot of people can go buy plants at a garden center or somewhere, and they'll kill that plant at home because they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Or plant it in the wrong place.
Right. And so that's where, a lot of the knowledge comes in, and at the root of this is, can we give young people or people looking for a second career some basic knowledge through this course where they can get exposed to it, see if they like it, see if it interests them, and then, get into the field where they can get some further training.
Right. That's so important to note that you have the need there, and then the Innovation Center and our community colleges can help meet that need. And one of the really great things about our courses is that it is rapid, and their students complete 2 portions of the course. There's a kind of a hybrid model there, which we'll talk about. But our courses are, and there's an online portion that our students will complete that gives them that background knowledge. It gives them that knowledge about the particular plant, or it gives them knowledge about the sun exposure of that particular plant, or how a lawnmower maintenance is important, and how to properly care for your equipment. And so having that background knowledge is important, and that's what we build in those online courses. But what we also build is the lab plan, and the lab plan gives them those skills, and they get to practice. So in the online course, they're learning, and we're practicing and assessing, and we're also then going out into the lab, and they're going to practice those skills, those hands-on, tangible skills that they'll use in those careers. So that's important to note there. So
Before venturing off into that, I'm curious, and maybe our listeners will be too, but if Russell, if you could give us a little bit of history of your progression in the industry. It's of interest to me. And then I don't mine is, I have a vested interest in this course myself personally. So I'd like to know some of your history in the profession.
So I studied horticulture at Auburn University, got a bachelor's in horticulture, and I went to work for a large landscape company in Memphis, Tennessee. And I always, I was a little bit scared of owning my own company, of having that level of responsibility for myself and others to kind of get that going. So I wanted to go work for a big company and kind of see how they do it. And I thought, I can gain some knowledge here that maybe I can use on my own, or if I can't handle it at a big company, I can drop back to a smaller company and still have the knowledge to be an asset. I was there for about 8 years. And it was great. I learned a lot. Then I moved to Atlanta, worked for a mid-sized company, was very successful over there. But ultimately, the labor challenges were what was causing me to look for other opportunities. We were short on drivers, short on knowledgeable people, and it felt like every day, you would come into work and find out 3 guys weren't there. And it's how do I meet my customers' expectations and get this work done when I don't have a full complement of people to do the job? And so that, combined with some personal issues that were going on at the time, just made me kind of get burnt out a little bit. So I looked for other opportunities. Politics and the things that I do now, but they were looking for somebody to be kind of a champion for industry that would go out and do those things. And then in addition to managing that part, how do we get people interested in working in the industry, and how do we get people interested in buying plants? Because those are the 2 cogs of the commerce wheel that we got to keep going. And so that's when I started the equipment rodeos to try to get kids interested. We started some garden seminars to try to get consumers interested in buying plants and promoting the benefits of plants. When people are dealing with disposable income, how do we get them to choose our product versus something else?
Yeah. So your experience is more from the association side than the actual practice side, if you will.
Oh no, I was in industry
Okay.
on the front lines for 13 years before I came to this.
And then got into the association side. Okay.
Yep. So I was in the field. When I came out of college, I was on a crew. And did that for a year, then went into estimating and then account management, kind of overseeing the crews.
Right.
So I kind of saw a lot of the progression from being in the field up through management.
Right. Hearing that there is a shortage, that's one thing that when we film for the course, I did hear over and over. We incorporate videos, and you connected me with 2 great filming sites and great individuals that we filmed with. And one of those was Flowerwood Nursery in Loxley, Alabama. Can you tell us a little bit about Flowerwood Nursery?
Sure. Flowerwood is the biggest nursery in Alabama. They've got multiple locations for anybody that travels down to the beach. If you go along the side of I-10 there, you'll see one of their locations, just plants as far as the eye can see. And because of their size and scope, they're kind of innovators in our industry. They do some unique things down there as far as, how they take care of plants and efficiencies, becoming faster at what they do. Do things and how they might incorporate that in their own operations. So, they're leaders in the industry, but also, willing to help others and share some of the knowledge that they've gained over the years.
Do they sell outside of their region? I mean, or are they pretty much? I mean, I know that's a very large company, but is primarily do they sell? Well, while some of the trees and stuff I know are bought from north and brought down, do they sell their products up north, or is it because of the zone differences? It's not.
So a lot of the plants move from south to north.
Okay.
The garden centers up north, say Michigan or somewhere like that, for example, they might be able to grow azaleas, but because it warms up later there, our material goes into flower sooner. So a garden center, could buy locally up there. It might still just be green, but if they get an azalea from Alabama and ship it up there, it's in bloom a lot earlier. So when you put that on the side of the road, you're drawing in customers a lot quicker because you got product that's in flower earlier.
It was incredible to see their operation, and they have hundreds of employees, and it was an area that I've driven by multiple times through I-10. I never knew how large of an operation it was and the many acres that they have. But it was a great experience, and they were very knowledgeable and very kind to let us film with them, and we got some incredible footage of our beautiful state on top of it, guys. We got some. I mean, again, their land is just beautiful, and what they have there. So it was a great experience.
It's certainly a large organization. I'm going to inject this because I said a minute ago, I have a personal interest in this. Before I came to the Innovation Center, I was in municipal government park and rec administration as an assistant director and a director for about 17 years. So much of that was landscaping. Obviously, was a medium to large size municipality and a smaller municipality. But again, all the turf, all the landscaping, the parks and all that. So, and then before I did that, I got to know about that job as I was working for a large landscaping company in North Alabama.
Okay.
Not as large as some of the ones in Atlanta and Birmingham, but a large regional one. And so I kind of envied the guys that had gone to Auburn. I went to Auburn, but not in horticulture. If I had to do over again, I probably would have looked at that because it was an interest of mine. I learned a lot from my mother-in-law. Was a lot of self-taught stuff, a little bit of creative side to me. And I went to work doing design and sales for this large company, and we did quite a few six-figure jobs, bid on them, install them, and stuff like that. So when I heard this course was coming on, it was of interest and excitement to me. So I was glad to know. But we used to buy a lot of our stuff from there's a large family organization in Athens. I think they're out of business now, but certainly not the size of down in Lossley, but similar operation, just on a much smaller scale.
So just out of curiosity, you said it was your mother-in-law that got you interested in plants, or was
Yeah, she was not. She had a Southern living background. She had she just had a natural love for plants. We would go to nurseries and plant stores, and she'd see something she liked, and she'd go home and find a place to put it, as opposed to saying, I need this to go here. She'd just find a plant she liked and then go find a place. They had a large estate, and she'd dig out a place and plant it and study it and watch it and cut it and share it. And so it was just her love for it that and I was telling somebody the other day, when I was a kid, Dad had me working on the car, working in the yard, and working in the shop. And in the shop and in the yard are the two things that stuck. I couldn't tell you anything about a car, but you get that, I got it from my family, the love and interest of it.
Right. Well, that's what I was curious about. So we do scholarships and offer scholarships to college students, and they have to write a letter of interest. And one of the questions we ask is, what got you interested in horticulture? Mm-hmm. And I would say about 90% of the students, it's a grandparent that got them interested, and the other 10% is a parent.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
When we go out and do our seminars on the consumer side, a lot of them are master gardeners that we're talking to, and I try to really promote to them to have purpose. It's like, you may not realize it, but you have a lot of influence over the people, in your world, especially your kids and grandkids. So be intentional about what you're doing and help promote plants to them.
Absolutely.
Well, another place we filmed, speaking of young people, was Stonehenge Horticultural Alliance
Yep.
in Priceville. And Matt and his team, again, were so kind. And we spent the day filming mostly the lawn aspect, the maintenance there of that. And he had several young people who were working with him. And we interviewed several of them. And they mentioned that they could see themselves going forward and having a career and owning their own landscape business in the future. So it is important. And I'm sure you see that often in what you do. And do people often progress in this field where they can start out at an entry level and then progress to owning their own landscape business going forward?
Sure. There are some that do, kind of, as I mentioned earlier, there's that level of responsibility there when you become a business owner of, you're the top of the food chain. Now you've suddenly got a lot of people that are dependent on you to be successful in order for them to be successful. So there's some pressure that comes with that. That was, what stopped me from it was that feeling. But then once I got into industry and started working, I realized, if I wanted to go on vacation for a week, I would work twice as hard before I left and twice as hard when I got back to make sure that I had an enjoyable week and that I didn't leave problems for anybody else to deal with while I was gone. And so then I started to think, well, I'm treating this like it's my own business.
Right.
So I could have opened my own business. And now on the association side, I deal with, the board members and other members. I'm dealing with the owners of these companies. And yes, that responsibility is there, but there's also some freedom, that comes with that of if they decide they want to go, then they just stop and tell everybody, hey, I'm taking the week off here and I need y'all to take care of things. And of course you got to have good people to do that. And you got to train good people to do that.
Right.
But there's a lot of freedom there. So, that's one thing that's encouraging to me is that is there. And, at the end of the day, this is not rocket science. We're taking care of plants.
Yeah.
And if you understand the basics of biology of how to keep something alive, the plants need food, they need air, and they need water and sunlight. As long as you're providing those things, they're going to be okay for the most part.
Right.
There's extreme, weather for extreme cold or something coming in, they need to be prepared for, but for the most part, it kind of goes. And it's just like, somebody getting a haircut, you're just out there kind of
Right.
cutting the grass and trimming the bushes, keeping them
The job security, though,
Yeah.
just like cutting the hair and got to cut the grass. The
Right.
grass, it may grow a little better depending on the weather and the conditions and this and that, but it's going to grow.
Yeah.
It's got to be maintained, cut, and all those things.
Well,
so- or else it gets awful shaggy looking.
I won't call it totally recession proof, but I was in the industry in 08 and 09, when the economy really took a dip.
Mhm.
But all these big, at least in the metropolitan areas, the cities have ordinances that there's an expectation of how the landscape's taken care of. HOAs have an expectation of how it's taken care of. So unless you're in a rural area where somebody's willing to just let it go, for the most part, stuff's got to be done.
And what we saw when I was in it is during that time, you didn't have, maybe people didn't spend as much on fountains and hardscapes and outdoor cooking areas and that kind of thing in their residential, but you still had to maintain it. Still, like Russell said, the HOAs and the self-pride and all those things, you still had to maintain it.
Well, there was a big, I won't name them, but there was a very big organization that we did business for that their profits were fine.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, we need to cut back on the flowers out in the landscape because our employees are hurting.
Right.
It needs to appear that there's some pain everywhere. So let's dial X, Y, and Z back.
Even though they weren't really affected by it, they didn't want to appear
Yeah,
that they weren't.
yeah. They wanted to keep the morale up with their employees of like, hey, everybody's feeling the pain. So, on the one hand, that was a wise thing to do, but again, they could have kept going,
Right.
financially.
Let's talk about the
You want to talk about the lab?
The
or-
lab, yeah, of course. I think that's the most exciting part to me. Having been in the industry previously, now being associated with the Innovation Center and helping get these courses out, I'm excited for this one to finally get out there. I think it's going to be a great course.
It is.
I participated in. Matt and I went by on the first day of the lab at Wallace, Hansville with Jason, and we were able to stay for just a short time. And then I went back for the whole lab on the second day and the third day. And I think it's a great course. The experts that put it together covered a lot of territory, a lot of information. But once we roll this out, I can see it being a big hit in high schools with the ag programs, the heavy equipment that you've been pushing for a while. A kid gets in there and gets a skid steer excavator, landscape helper, stack that with a land survey helper. You got some skills for an industry that's going to be here for a while.
Russell, you were our SME, our subject matter expert for this course, and we build a task force that is industry experts. And so one of our tasks is to build the lab plan. And so in that lab plan, it's been a while since you probably looked at it, but can you talk about what skills were important to include and why those skills were important to include for that lab plan?
Sure. So, one of the main things that I guess we wanted to do is because there's a broad number of subjects in there, and as Tom alluded to, there's a lot in that lab. I think we've got it at 2 days right now.
Mhm.
I went to one of those at Wallace, and I was like, wow, this is drinking from a fire hose in
Yeah.
this lab. Covers a lot of information, but the goal isn't for the students to become an expert in it.
Right.
The goal is to expose them understanding the basics of equipment maintenance. How to clean an air filter, how to check the oil before you start a lawnmower. I mean, a lawnmower is an expensive piece of equipment.
Right.
And so if you go work for somebody and you treat it like it's not yours and you run it without oil and blow the motor up, that's an expense to an owner.
Right.
And so if we can teach these students how to become more valuable and what's important at a company, what they need to be on the lookout for, then they're adding value to the company and they become somebody that the employer wants to keep. As I mentioned earlier, seasonal job. So, sometimes winter rolls around and, hey, I've got a staff of 20, I may only need 15 through the winter. What can I bring to the table where I make sure I'm one of those 15? So, again, the mower maintenance, pruning. Pruning's a big one. Everybody wants to just grab some gas shears and just go whacking plants. That's not how they grow in nature.
Right.
So there is a place for that at times, but we also want to teach proper pruning practice and, how to make the different kind of cuts, what they do to the plant, what they trigger in the plant, so that they've got that knowledge. I think we touched briefly on irrigation.
Yep.
Irrigation systems are on, most commercial job sites, some residences.
Yep.
You need to know what an irrigation head is and how it functions. If there's a leak out there, you don't necessarily need to know how to fix it, but you need to know that that's probably an irrigation leak, and you need to tell somebody before you go drive a lawnmower through it and leave a big rut on a property that somebody's going to get a call and complain.
That was the irrigation component. Going from a company that did mostly commercial and residential stuff, irrigation was a big part of our business model. But then coming into the park and rec world, where you got guys who may not have worked those residential landscape jobs, this course could benefit them to go into that because it touches on the irrigation and others. But that was a big miss in the municipal world. Guys, that you got a lot of irrigation in a park and rec department, ball fields and stuff like that, and we had a lot of guys that didn't know nothing about irrigation because they had never worked with it before or taken a course where they learn about it. So even the I forgot which module it was, maybe the last module, next to last module in the course was irrigation, and Jason had a small system built with components and went over the components and what they did, and just that little bit of a hour or two exercise on that would give somebody a great deal of knowledge. So the whole lab was that way. You get a lot of little bit of knowledge about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and even, basic things like identifying weeds. At a base concept, a weed is a plant growing where it's not supposed to grow. So if you've got, most people want to think of them as, maybe a trash plant or something like that. But in reality, if you had a flower bed full of white flowers, but you had one red flower right in the middle of it, that red flower is a weed.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to kind of understand that, hey, if it doesn't look right, that's the one that you would want to go take out.
Right.
Or if at this time of year in spring, in a residential property especially, you got a lot of perennials that are just starting to pop out of the ground. All you see is green leaves. There's nothing, no flowers yet, and nothing decorative. How do we identify that that's a good plant versus a weed? And just to teach them, hey, if you see a lot of them planted in a line or some pattern, it's probably not a weed. The weeds are going to grow more sporadic. So if you see a pattern, don't just go whack that down with a weed eater because you think it's a weed. It may not be. Trying to think of what else we had.
Other one I liked, I thought was important was fertilization, whether it be liquid fertilization or granular pellet, dry fertilization. Again, you're not going to be an expert and go out and fertilizing lawns or whatever on your own, but you understand concepts and the importance of measuring, and because as you well know, a minor overstep on a liquid measurement could result in disaster. If you or you burn up a lawn because you put too much, or you wasted money because you didn't put enough out, or so just those concepts. Maybe the employee thinks, "Hey, I better ask the
Well,
question."
read the bag, read the label, right?
Right.
Just some basic information. I think there was a golf course in Birmingham a year or two ago that had a lot of greens get burned up because somebody put a chemical down that they thought was sand. And just, if you read that bag, you don't have that problem. And that was an expensive error for somebody. The other big thing is just plant health care, of understanding what a healthy plant would look like, that it should be a nice green color. But if you see something that's got yellow leaves or holes or spots in the leaves, you don't have to know what the pest or disease is. You don't have to know what to do to treat it. You just need to know to tell somebody in the company, up the ladder a little bit, hey, I think there's a problem over here. You're adding value to that company. And then over time, you're going to learn those things being in the industry or getting further training.
Yeah, it'd be much better off to look at something that you questioned early where it could still be treatable.
Yep.
Whether it's too much water, not enough water, too much fertilizer, not enough, or whatever.
Yep. And that's the other big issue with plants that people new to the industry don't necessarily understand. The symptoms of overwatering and underwatering look the same. The plant, gets wilty looking and turns yellow, and most people see that and they go, the plant's not getting enough water, and they just keep pouring more water to it. And it's like, if you just stick your finger in the dirt, you're going to realize it's wet. So now you're probably overwatering.
Yeah. I always learn something new when we were developing these courses. And that was one thing that I learned when I was out filming. Another thing I learned was the different types of mulch. I had no idea that, number one, there were so many different types, but number two, how greatly they affect the plant. Like, your decision on the type of mulch can affect your plant health. But that was one that was surprising to me. But did they use mulch in the lab, Tom?
Yep. And that was one thing too. Jason and his, I guess in that class there was, I went to two different ones, but they were his students. Wallace State Hansville has a tremendous horticulture program and resources and greenhouses and space and tools and equipment. Also, it was a beautiful place to run the lab. But that was one thing I was going to mention about the lab going forward. There is so much different information. I think we will need to be intentional when we select instructors and so forth, so that the lab is good. Wallace was good. They had all the things that you needed, that a student would need to see and touch, and they had plants out in the field you could identify and cut on, and grass to mow. They had all that. If it was an instructor, it could be, somebody like Stonehenge. They could be good instructors, but we would need to make sure in the lab plan that they had all the things they need to do all the modules. And then obviously, at a high school, it may be difficult to run this lab at a high school that really doesn't have any equipment or supplies or anything like that. Because I think the students will certainly get more out of it if they're able to touch and do all the things. And therefore that, and that was one of the changes we made from the first to seconds. We went back and made an intentional addition to the lab materials needed, because there were some things, some activities in the lab plan that weren't included on the lab material list.
Right.
So-
And that's important to note is our pilot. Our pilots are so important because we can build a course and we can think, okay, we're ready to go. We're set.
Yeah.
But until we have that pilot and we say, okay, is everything where it needs to be? So can you talk about the pilot process and what you've seen in this pilot and other pilots and
7, 8, I don't know, pilots. But like you said, that's the first time to really run it. You know, we get the industry request. We put together as the subject matter experts and the team that come up with the outline back to our curriculum team to put the course together. Hey, we're ready to let's try this thing and see how it looks. We think it looks pretty good, but let's try it. Let's get a good instructor and maybe we're even intentional about the students, what type of student they are. Are they adult, open enrollment? Are they K-12, a mixture, whatever. We put together some intentional students that can give us some good feedback, and then we run it. You know, we think it's good, but like I said, this one was an example. The lab plan itself was great. The shortcoming, as we decided, was the lab material list. So whoever was going to put this lab on would need to know all the materials. So we fixed that, run it again. But some of the other pilots, it's just like you said, it's important. It can look good on paper, but once you hit the market with it, you're like, I didn't think about that.
right?
Theory work that we make a note of. One of the students says, hey, I thought this and that, and so we tweak those, and then we run it again. And most of them we run for the second time. We got those issues out of the way, and they're good to go. I think we've had some discussion on the new forklift one. I think that pilot went great. The second one didn't even really need any tweaks, and we're getting pretty close to really ready to roll that one out. So it's exciting for me being a new member of this team, but after I've been here long enough to kind of see some of these courses come together from an idea to a class. And I know with you on your curriculum team, that's exciting to see an idea in somebody's head come to,
Yes.
hey, it's ready to roll out.
We go all the way from the industry request to that finish line where we see the first students enrolled and what impact that will have not only on those individuals, but also on our industry. We're helping other businesses get employees that they desperately need. And people either upskill, learn new skills. You may know a little bit about lawnmowers, but you may learn a little bit more. Or you may know a little bit about plants, but you may learn those skills to make you successful in this industry and go forward.
Well, this one's going to be, I think, what excites me about it, and I think Russell would agree with, there is so much. I mean, the landscape nursery industry covers so much. I mean, if you want to get into residential maintenance, hardscape installation. Some companies just do irrigation work. That's all they do. Some just do lighting work. That's all they do. Some dabble in a lot of it. Some of these guys could take this course and say, I have a like for small engines. Well, small engine repair and the landscape industry are hand in hand, and it's hard to find a good small engine repair guy that's not 6 months out. And if you're running a business and you need your mower and your weed eater returned back, maybe at least you got such a good relationship with your dealer, he can loan you one while you're getting yours fixed. Because without your tools, I mean, you're dead in the water. So, but it touches so much nursery work, and you may go through this and decide, I don't really want to maintain, but the world of insecticides and fertilizer is of interest to me, and you go off in that. I mean, there's just so much that you could get into in this industry. I think it's I'm super excited for it to roll out.
One thing, when we filmed at Flowerwood and Stonehenge, they mentioned, I always like to ask one question at the very end of an interview is, what's the best part of your job? Because I think it's important for people who are thinking about this as a career to say, what am I getting into? What can I expect? And with those interviews, one thing that I heard over and over, as you mentioned, their office is outside, which was great. They're like, I love to be outside. The other thing they mentioned was how it made their customers happy. And to see the look on their customer's face when a job was complete and the satisfaction with that. And several of them mentioned that. So is that something that you hear across the industry, Russell? Do you see that often as that's part of the job?
Absolutely. Being able to make a difference for somebody in terms of their happiness or just the environment. People talk a lot about climate these days, and we're on the front line of that because, plants don't just look good. They serve a purpose out there. They're giving us oxygen to breathe. They're holding the soil in place and stopping erosion from happening and waterways getting polluted. So there's those two components out there that really have a lot to do with how people feel. Just sometimes just looking at a plant can brighten your day. And so certainly, when a homeowner might see, a new landscape get installed, they think about how their house was before, and then all of a sudden it's this more beautiful, bright place that they look forward to coming home to every day.
Plus, exactly, but also the employee. I mean, there's not every job an employee has. Do you see
The immediate.
the immediate?
Yes.
In this industry, you go to work, and if you're whether you're maintenance or hardscape installation, whatever, typically you're going to see a result at the end of the day, and be able to stand there and say, "Man, I did a good job today,"
Right.
and it shows. I mean, so that self confidence and satisfaction of seeing some people that's a big motivator for me is be able to do something, stand back and look at it and be proud of it. So not only, as Russell alluded to, the satisfaction of the customer and the happiness on their face, and they're excited when they write that check to the to that company, but also it excites me from the employee's viewpoint. And this is one of those industries where there is some instant gratification for what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, one other thing that I wanted to add when you were talking about earlier is we just had an economic contribution study completed for agriculture in Alabama. And so the nursery and greenhouse industry has an economic contribution of $554 million annually.
Wow.
The landscape side of the industry was $1.2 billion.
Wow.
So it is massive, and there's a lot of opportunity. And kind of as we talked about before, you've got irrigation, you've got stonework, walls, pavers, lighting, all these other components, tree work even that come into this. And so, for a young person to be able to find a niche in that where maybe there's not a lot of competition, or because it's hard work, somebody else is not willing to do it, you can kind of start setting your own price on some things if you've got the skills to back it up and really carve out a good living for yourself. And so for somebody that, may want to drive that nice F-250 four-wheel drive truck, hey, suddenly that's a work truck, and you need that because you're pulling pallets of rock or pavers all day long. So there's a lot of opportunity. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're really limited by what you're willing to do.
Yeah.
How many hours do you want to work, how hard you want to work, but the opportunity is there for people that are willing to grab it.
Could Russell talk quick before we wrap up about this was one thing I spoke last week at the land surveyors. It was Geo Day at Troy University, but there was some discussion about the industry, the need of jobs, which we've discussed, but the salaries and so forth. Talk about just quickly for high school students or otherwise getting in this industry, not necessarily the specifics unless you have it, but is it a good market, good money for a high school kid with a certificate like this, and maybe one or two others could do well?
Yeah, like anything else, the more experience you have, the more money you can earn. And so for somebody coming in, the money may not be that great, but it's one of those, if you can get through all 4 seasons, get through a year and really understand the beast that is the landscape and how you can work in it, or at a nursery, the different production cycles that go through the course of the year. If you can get that year under your belt, suddenly you've got a lot of knowledge that you can then implement and be a better employee in year 2 and year 3. And when employers see somebody's got the it factor, that they're committed to the work, that they can do a good job, they'll invest in them. And that's when the money starts to come. So it may not be there day one,
Right.
but just like any other employment you might find, if you can get through a little bit of time, I think this will escalate a lot more rapidly than some other careers. And so for somebody getting in, once you once you become responsible for other people and get into management roles, it wouldn't be unusual to be making $50,000-$60,000 a year. If you're responsible for a whole branch, you might be 70, 80. And, those are for some respectable sized companies. If you get into some really big national type companies, money and bonuses kind of goes up from there. So a lot of opportunity.
That will be one thing going forward as we start to roll these labs out. We will lean back on you and the Association for Industry Partnerships. We have been really intentional here lately about having our community colleges bring the industry partners into the labs to, ideally be to offer somebody a job and we could document, hey, this guy got a job because of this course. That's the cherry on the top.
That's why we built these
We want it.
courses. Yeah.
So if we could document that, that's ideal. But
Right.
secondary is like Sharon said, we want to get them a skill. But if we can, in this particular course, be very intentional about bringing industry partners to our labs and help with you throughout the state on who would be good. I know at the equipment rodeo in Auburn or in Opelika, I was there. A couple of the local companies did a great job pitching the industry to those kids that were there. So we will need to do that, and you expect we'll circle back and get some of those contacts as we begin to roll this out, because this will be one, like you said, I think it'll be important to tell these students, especially the high school students, about the industry and about how, while you may not step into this job making 70 or 80, it's certainly possible within a year or 2 or 3. So if you like it, if you like what you're doing, the industry is good and solid. It may not be one you step into at a high rate, but it could come very quickly if you do all the things that are needed. So we'll definitely be circling back with Russell to get industry information to pair up with these colleges as we roll this out.
So we've heard a lot of positive remarks about this course, and so we're excited to see it roll out and where it'll be in a year. How many students will complete the course, and how many employers will hire those students? I see that this course has a lot of potential, and we're seeing the excitement, and maybe in a year from now, we'll look back and say, wow.
And the K-12 world might not, we're getting questions about it. I think it's going to be a popular high school course because with the ag programs in the CT programs, the ag is big. So this will be, they got skid steer and those other things, but this will be another one that
it would be great for summer employment between, for high school students. They can work, and several of the students that we interviewed, that those workers in the landscape business, they were high schoolers and they would work in the summers and then after school. So it is a good career while they're in school even. So I think there's a lot of potential here, and we're so excited about this course, and it's a labor of love to get these courses across that finish line, and we're there, and we're here to celebrate that and see where it goes. Russell, do you have any last words for us for the podcast today?
I'd just like to thank you guys for partnering with us to produce this program. I think it's going to be great for our industry. It's going to be great for students. And I'll just plug the Skills for Success as a whole. I've got a 15-year-old son at home, and I'm looking forward to him getting into some of these courses just because he doesn't, like any teenager, doesn't really know what he wants to do yet. And so my goal is to expose him to as many things as possible. And I feel like these courses are kind of a building block to do that, just to get some broad exposure to different things.
I would agree with you. Not being in the K-12 side, Matt and I go to a lot of career fairs at high schools and stuff. And so we not only, like Sharon said earlier, the Skills for Success was designed to rapid training, get a skill, get a job. But in the high school world, which we're kind of been venturing off into more, this is career exploration, or we tell the kids, check a box. I'm not interested anymore, or I'm interested and want to pursue it. But these courses, all of the courses can help in that because they're all introductory at a certain level. And it may kind of be that springboard to say, hey, yeah, I really do. I thought I liked it. Now I know I liked it. Now I want to pursue it. Or I thought I liked it. I took the course and not really what I thought. So I'm going to check that one off the box. And there's value in that as well.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I tell my kids as well is, learning what you don't want to do. I thought I wanted to go into landscape installation. I thought landscape maintenance was boring, and then I went and spent a summer working in Atlanta on an internship, and my worldview changed on both of those. I didn't want to be on a construction site, and I thought, hey, I can learn maintenance. It seemed boring and repetitive, but I learned I can make efficiencies on a job site and make it just a well-oiled machine where I come out there and just get through it quicker and quicker every week.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for being here to talk about our nursery landscape worker course. And again, that's going to be starting soon. So this concludes our episode of Innovation Unplugged. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow on all of your social media platforms.